And that's why I can say with confidence, there has never been a man or a woman, not me, not Bill, nobody, more qualified than Hillary Clinton to serve as President of the United States of America.
So President Obama there leaving no doubt that Hillary Clinton should be, in his view, America's choice in November's election. Meanwhile, her Republican opponent, Donald Trump, found himself on the receiving end today of blistering attacks from Democratic Party leaders. Good evening, I'm Jerry Seib, talking to you from Philadelphia, site of the Democratic Convention, joined by the Wall Street Journal's editor-in-chief, Gerard Baker. It took until about 11:45 at night, Jerry, but I think the Democrats got just now the scene they wanted, Barack Obama locking arms with Hillary Clinton at the end of a very long Obama speech that tried to tie together his years and the next 4 years.
Yeah, I think it was a very, it was a powerful speech by President Obama. Look, I think it tried to do three things, essentially. I think it tried to give a summation and a celebratory summation of his 8 years in office. It tried, as you say, to draw a picture of America, optimistic, looking forward to the future with achievements of the last 8 years and more to look forward to in the next few years, together with a repudiation of what Donald Trump has said and some of the things that Donald Trump has said. And I think it succeeded on most levels in that respect. It was an intelligent speech which wove those together rather well. I think if it had one weakness, it was much more about him than it was about Secretary Clinton. I mean, it was not, obviously he thoroughly and warmly endorsed Secretary Clinton. He talked about her as leading forward, of leading the country forward for the next 4 or 8 years. But it was really very much a justification of his presidency, a very passionate, personal, deeply held, and I thought also one that I think attempted to address some of the critics that maybe he's been partisan, maybe he's been he hasn't been a unifying president. I think he was trying to bring all that together. So it was very much about him, about his presidency, and I think Mrs. Clinton was really something of an afterthought.
Yeah, it was a little bit of a sandwich. The first half about the achievements of the Obama years. The second half very much about the dangers of Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton kind of in the middle there. And in that dangers of Donald Trump, I mean, there was a fair amount of it. He talked about literally that, a dangerous person. Let's listen to what he had to say in that regard.
But what we heard in Cleveland last week wasn't particularly Republican, and it sure wasn't conservative. What we heard was a deeply pessimistic vision of a country where we turn against each other and turn away from the rest of the world. There were no serious solutions to pressing problems, just the fanning of resentment and blame and anger and hate. And that is not the America I know.
So, this took us to something you and I have been talking about periodically all week long, which is the difficult middle ground that Hillary Clinton has to try to find herself tomorrow night in her speech, which is somewhere between the dark America that Donald Trump and to some extent Bernie Sanders paint, and the bright picture that Barack Obama at the end of his 8 years wants America to see. You don't want to sound as if you've bought totally into the bright America, because people who aren't that happy and aren't that comfortable think you're looking at it with rose-colored glasses and you don't have a grip on reality. But you don't want to be dark and pessimistic, because that helps Donald Trump. Tough ground to cover for Hillary Clinton tomorrow.
Yeah, and I thought what was so interesting about that speech by the president tonight was, I mean, it's amusing really to hear the president talk about how the Cleveland Convention wasn't conservative or wasn't Republican, as though actually they would be positive things in his view. It was I mean, he spent the last 8 years, and in many ways the last 20 plus years, railing against conservatives, railing against Republicans, and now saying, well, it's a shame that they've nominated someone who's neither conservative nor Republican. That was very interesting. And by the way, also at one point, quite remarkably, invoking Ronald Reagan's shining city on a hill. I don't think you have heard the president invoke that before. So it was, and I think that's part of what they're trying to do, Jerry. And to answer your question, that is part of what they are trying to portray Donald Trump as, not only, dangerous and wild-eyed and crazy and all those things, but really, they're trying to detach him, I think. They understand that I think one of Donald Trump's weaknesses, real weaknesses, is that a lot of Republicans, a lot of conservatives are very uneasy with him. So actually, trying to emphasize that and to say actually this is not a Republican, it's not a conservative, I think is something that they think will help them. Look, it is a problem that, however, that Hillary Clinton has, and we'll see how she addresses it tomorrow night. How do you say the last 8 years have been great because we've had a Democratic president, and I am the Democratic nominee, and I want to be the Democratic president going forward, but addressing those issues that people have, which have not been fixed, the elements of the economy, of society, foreign policy, that maybe haven't gone so well in the last 8 years. It's a very difficult balancing act.
They tried to detach Donald Trump from traditional conservatism, as you say. They also tried to detach him from working class voters, which is, I think, the even more important task. Joe Biden, the vice president, gave his own speech tonight. He had something to say about that. Let's listen.
His cynicism is unbounded. His lack of empathy and compassion can be summed up in a phrase that I suspect he's most proud of having made famous: "You're fired." I mean, really, I'm not joking. Think about that. Think about that. Think about everything you learned as a child, no matter where you were raised. How can there be pleasure in saying you're fired? He's trying to tell us he cares about the middle class. Give me a break. That's a bunch of malarkey.
So, that's a little bit of a picture that tells you why some people thought Joe Biden would have been the better guy to run against Donald Trump this year. He goes to those working class values in a way I think Hillary Clinton can't really do it. I thought there was probably too little, in my opinion, too little of that in this convention. Maybe it'll get fixed tomorrow night. But this battle over working class white voters wasn't joined as fully this week as I think Democrats might have.
Yeah, it was interesting. Joe Biden accusing Donald Trump of malarkey. That's an Irish Irish term. So we had Joe Biden speaking Irish and Tim Kaine speaking Spanish tonight. So we're making sure there was full diversity covered from the podium. Yeah, I agree with you very much, Sherry. Look, that is something, and we've heard that, Sherry, you and I, in the last couple of days from senior members of the Hillary campaign. It's something they clearly intend to drive home very hard in the next few months, which is that Donald Trump is no friend of the working man and woman. That he is, that they understand that is where he's getting a lot of his support, and that a lot of voters like the way Donald Trump speaks, they like the sort of straightness, the directness, the language that he uses, the fact that he talks about standing up for the little guy. That worries the Democrats a lot. They are trying to detach him from that by saying things like, you just heard what Joe Biden said tonight about his catchphrase being "you're fired." They will talk a lot about the record that Donald Trump has had in business, where sometimes some of his workers have been on the receiving end of rough treatment. Some people, whether it's to do with Trump University or some of these other businesses he's been involved in, the little guy that he's standing up for has actually sometimes got the shaft from Donald Trump. So they are going to make that case, and I think that's going. They're going to try and really hammer that home and really undercut his credentials as being the guy who stands up for the working person. Because I mean, that's one of the interesting things that you've seen in American politics in the last 20 years. That shift, one of the big demographic and political shifts you've seen in the last 20 years is working class voters going away from the Democrats to, especially white working class voters, away from the Democrats towards the Republicans. Trump, is looking to accelerate that. The Democrats, it's going to be important, if they're to stop him, to peel back some of those voters for them.
And I think the one thing, as a final thought here, that we learned tonight is that if Barack Obama is needed to carry Hillary Clinton across the finish line to get that job done, he's going to do it. That's a guy who looked to me like he wants to be involved in this campaign.
Yeah, look, I think one of the reasons you heard Barack Obama speak so passionately tonight is Barack Obama's legacy is very much on the line. Exactly. Think about this. If he, the first African-American president, if Donald Trump wins in November, what will that say about President Obama's legacy? It will mean that even though he won 2 terms, and he won 2 terms with the majority of the vote both times, best share of the vote that any president's had in the last, any Democrats had in decades, but he will have failed to secure his legacy if he hands it over to to a Republican, and particularly to Donald Trump, who stands in so many ways, whether it's on issues of race and the economy and international relations, for something that is really radically different from what Obama stands for. So I think it is, Obama realizes that it's his legacy that's at stake too.
Sets up a fascinating fall, that's for sure.